Hey guys, welcome back. This is CodeRed Rules. I've got the final Grinderschool Cash Game Series of 2011. Let's go and get started here. We've got about 20 hands to go over, so it should take me a full hour. Real quick, this is actually the first hand of the day, pretty much. Four-handed here, so we just started, and BubTubs opens up, and rather than calling out a position, I don't know if you remember a couple podcasts ago. I believe we talked about, why not to play out of position and playing these marginal hands where I think I could be ahead of my opponent's range here, but if I call out of positions, it's pretty much a losing maneuver, or at best a break-even play. Where as I can 3-bet here, and I know it's going to show a profit because I know he's actually raising quite wide and be able to get a lot of folds. So I turn this marginal hand to a bluff, and I'd rather re-raise a hand like Ace 10 here than even in a hand like Jack 10, because it doesn't make any sense to fold Ace 10 and then raise Jack 10, just because Ace 10 is definitely going to be a stronger hand than Jack 10. If you guys, I'll probably reference this quite a bit. I think we do a lot of 3-bet and 4-bet stuff in this cash game video, and for a lot of Microstakes players out there, there's not a lot of talk about that in the Microstakes videos, and for good reasons. You're not really going to be focusing on that at all at the stakes that you're playing. But what you should be, if you're interested in more information about that, there's quite a bit in the Poker 201 and the How to Master series that are available to the full stake subscriptions. So I re-raise here. As you can see, I make it around 11 big blinds from his 3. I'm not necessarily don't need to re-raise a large size to get my opponent to fold, in my opinion here. I feel like the smaller I make it, one, it entices him to maybe like call with a weaker hand. Like, so if he calls with like, I don't know, King Queen or Queen Jack, I'm still ahead of that hand range. It's gonna be harder to play out of position, you know what I mean? But I am ahead, and that helps quite a bit. So what BubTubs does though is actually 4-bets me, and I like his 4-bet size to what is that, like 22.5 big blinds. And one of the questions that we had was, why do we 4-bet small? And it's entirely a math-based issue here. So the profitability of a 4-bet, especially a bluff, is technically based on, one, like how often I fold after I 3-bet, and then also the raise size you make it, right? So, because when I do have a hand here and I 5-bet shove over the top of you, whether you lose 90 cents or $1.10 or $1.20 or even $1.50 here, I mean, that 60 cents there, you're not really gaining any extra fold equity by making it that large. So you have the same fold equity, but you're risking 60 cents more by making it an obscene raise size, and that's just profit that you're throwing out on the drain. So, anyway, so he's 4-betting me, and again here, this is the first hand of the session, and most of the time, I'm folding here. I don't really. Most of the time, players aren't going to be 4-bet bluffing me, and I'm not that worried about it to the point where I have to 5-bet bluff all these people. But my thought process was, this is the first hand. You know what I mean? Both of us are kind of trying to set some kind of history here of aggressive maneuver, and I'm basically just like, you know what? If he's got the nuts in the first hand, bad luck to me. And so I just go ahead and I jam it in, and then he folds. When we talk about it later, he actually has Ace 9 in the situation. So mine was more like a value bet shove. I like his 4-bet. There's nothing wrong with his 4-bet at all. And if it would have not been if it would have just been like a random hand in the future, I wouldn't have just 5-bet shove here, because to really have a read on a 5-bet shove, you have to really know that your opponent's 4-betting quite a bit. And I don't really know at this point. I mean, I know that BubTubs is a Grinderschool regular, and I know he's an aggressive player, so I don't have any specific reads on that. But if you're playing against just a normal player, and you're playing against a random hand, you're going to be folding here pretty much every time. But I wanted to talk about the 4-bet sizing here real quick before we go into more bet sizing theory. This is a great 4-bet size. I'll show you in a few hands here what not a good 4-bet size is. All right, so before we do that, let's go on to the next hand. Check raised, he goes by Easy2CY on the Grinderschool forums. He raises up. He's got Queen Jack suited in the situation. He gets re-raised by an aggressive player. Pretty much a donkey, right? 37-21, small sample size. You only want to be calling these hands, though, with a very strong hand range. And we talk very rarely. We don't talk a lot about three bets in the Microstakes session. I think Easy2CY is a Microstakes subscriber, so talk about. And I know this video goes to Microstakes subscribers too. So like a lot of the three bet theory and four bet theory that we go over in Grinder School is all full stakes subscriptions. But what I'll say here is that we want to be able to play a hand range that does really well against our opponent's three betting percentage. So let's just say our opponent, is a crazy guy and he's three betting 9% here. Oh, let me go ahead and throw this over. All right, so this is a fairly wide three bet range, and he could be re-raising instead of pocket ace, he could be raising 8-7 suited up, right? But with a hand like queen jack suited, it doesn't matter all that much because we're not going to be ahead of really any hand. As you can see here, we are on like the very bottom, the very worst hand of his three betting range. All right, so let's just keep that hand range in there, and then let's go ahead and throw queen jack suited in here. All right, we're going to see how we do. All right, so we're pretty much 34% equity, and we're out of position playing against aggressive players. It's going to be really hard for us to play, right? So what's a good hand here to really call with? I wouldn't be calling with any hand worse than ace-queen offsuit, and even ace-queen offsuit is a marginal situation. It's a coin flip. I would probably stick with ace-queen suited here, ace-king, and then down to tens. In this situation, the pairs actually play really easy post flop. You're not necessarily trying to hit a set, but like your opponent is going to give up a lot when he misses. The more fishy your opponent is, like the more maniacal and the more he's just going to bet, the less we want to play these marginal pairs because he's going to throw us off our hand. So this would probably be my 3-bet calling range here. Queen jack suited, I would probably never call a 3-bet in any position. I think it's a good candidate for a 4-bet bluff. If you feel like your opponent's going to be 3-betting you quite a bit, I would probably call it only on like a heads up in a heads up game. There's very rarely would I ever call a 3-bet with queen jack suited. Okay. So and now we can go to post flop here, and we end up having just the open in straight draw. And think to yourself, is a situation where I'm going to be wanting to get it all in? Normally in a 3-bet pot, yes, actually. This is a good spot for us to go ahead and check raise all in, as the screen name says. However, what we did was we went ahead and lit out and then called the all in. And this is the exact not what we want to have happen, right? Because for those of you out there, right, when you have open and straight draw, you have roughly 33% equity given what your opponent has. We're only getting 1.6 to 1, so our pot odds in this situation don't even dictate the call. But what would happen if we were to check raise here? If he were to bet to bet 56 cents, if you're the one check raising all in, all right, then we would still have the same 40% pot odds there, but the extra fold equity that we have by the check raise makes it a much better play, in my opinion, because the fold equity there adds to profitability. And when you have a draw like this, being able to check raise all in with the draw is a great balance maneuver. Otherwise, when we bet out, we have to fold to the raise because we're not getting the correct pot odds to make this play. And I understand that, like, you want to be able to play this open and straight draw to the river. I would just go ahead and check jam all in though, right, and we're gonna see our opponent has like the nuts here with the pocket aces, and we don't even have 30%. We have 25% equity here, so there's not. As you can see, we have a lot weaker hand than we thought we did. And if our opponent stacks off here, we actually don't have we wouldn't have 33% equity. Our opponent probably has like tens, kings, aces, and ace king, and against that hand range, yeah, we're right around like 20 to 25%, and that's not necessarily a great scenario to be calling off our stack. Now, check raising all in, on the other hand, not that bad of a play. All right, we go on to the next hand here. I've got the kings, and re-raise. We got Snork, Grinderschool subscriber. I make it 4x out of position, which is a pretty standard 3-bet for me. I would make it 4 times the re-raise size out of position, and then about 3.5 times in position. He calls, and our opponent, he has queen jack offsuit here, and so we just talked about like what a good 3-bet calling range would be, even against a maniac. And I'm a light 3-better for the most part, and queen jack offsuit again would never be a 3-bet call. It might be a 4-bet bluff, but even then, most of the time you're just gonna be folding it. and very rarely bluffing, because even as a bluff, it doesn't play very well. So he flops a jack. The ace comes out. We're going to go over a little bit of what to do with kings and the ace high board. The proper play, though, is to just go ahead and check it. A lot of players are still betting this hand here, trying to get your opponent to fold. In reality, we want to get calls. Trying to, my entire strategy is to try to go for value. And in all honesty, if I bet out here and I get a call, I'm not going to be able to really play another street because my opponent pretty much is going to have like the ace the entire time. So my goal is to really make it look like I had a bluff pre-flop and then extract one sort of value from my opponent on a later street. So I check. He checks behind, and that's a good sign because it probably means he doesn't have the ace or even like ace king. And so I'm fairly confident on my head here. And he bets out 2/3, and this is another problem with that I have with his hand with the queen jack is that even post flop, we just want to check it down. We don't want to be trying to get value from our opponent here. There's not really a scare card out there. A scare card would be a king, but in all honesty, I don't know what hand that I would have that I have a king, maybe like king queen right now that our opponent would be afraid of, right? And I wouldn't be 3-betting king queen. So yeah, this is not a great value bet spot, and certainly definitely shouldn't be a bluff here. As first off, like the only hands that are going to be calling him are going to be like the jack or better in the situation. Like I don't see myself calling with pocket tens in the situation. So I flat it. The ace is a great card for me. He checks it behind me, showdown. I showdown the winner. All right, so we can go on to this hand. Heads up between Kenny and Snork. Real quick, Snork has pocket fives here. Kenny has pocket jacks. And so pre-flop call is fine. Kenny's c-bet here on the flop is perfectly standard. And here is where an inexperienced player would bluff. Like this board, first off, is not a very good bluffable board. Because when we raise in this board, we're representing absolutely nothing. Like you're trying to represent the 3. Sorry. And in all honesty, you never have the 3 here, and you very rarely, if ever, have pocket sixes. So you really only want to raise an experienced player in the situation with the value hand because it doesn't look like a value hand ever. Like if you do have pocket sixes here, it's a great spot though. It's a great spot to raise. But what happens is you guys all slow play. Whenever you flop pocket sixes on this board, you call every single flop because you're like, well, I don't want my opponent to fold. It's the exact opposite of what you should be thinking because you know what? A raising on this board looks entirely fishy. You know what I mean? As in, I don't ever have what I'm having. And there's actually a rule that states, any raise on a paired board is always a bluff. And, it's not always a bluff, but it's a great strategy to really think about. So really avoid raising the raised pairs paired boards as bluffs. And then the other thing that I want to go over with is pocket fives bluffing post flop. First off, we only have 2 outs. So the profitability of a bluff is solely dependent, again, on the equity we have in our hand. And if you guys only have Microstakes subscription, I talk about that quite a bit in the math series that we've got, and I go over like the profitability of bluffing and on how to really calculate how much value is in a bluff. And that's again available to full subscriptions. The bluffing with pocket pairs post flop is not great because when you get called, you only have 8% equity, and that's 2 outs. So we want to be able to raise hands that have a lot of equity in this situation. And also, pocket fives could be ahead here on this board. So we have showdown value, and we don't necessarily want to bluff hands that have showdown value. All right. So not a very good bluff here by Snork, and then we check it down with the jacks, and jacks played it perfectly post flop. So well played. All right, we'll go on to the next hand here, and I've got pocket fours, and that's really just a standard hand. But Snork, on the other hand, decides to cold call with a different hand. He has 10-9 offsuit. And offsuit connectors aren't very good hand at all. They're garbage. They should never be played maybe as a blind steal, but in terms of calling, all right, they're not anywhere close to the same as 10-9 suited. And what happens is players are like, oh well, 10-9 suited is a good hand. 10-9 offsuit can't be that much worse. And in all reality, it really is that much worse. Like the offsuit connectors are absolutely garbage compared to the suited connectors, just because you can't make that flush. So if you had like a suited connector here and you decided to call against a big fish, it's a decent call. But when you have the offsuit connector here pre-flop, it's garbage. Just go ahead and fold it out. Don't even think about calling. All right. So on the next hand, Snork raises under the gun. He has ace queen with the ace of spades. So this is a great board for him. He's going to go ahead and c-bet it out, which is great. He hits nut flush here on the turn. He bets it out. Nice little value bet here. Some players would slow play. This is a great bet to have. He gets called. So what does this call mean in this situation? This call means that our opponent either has a set, a straight, or a flush himself. Okay, and the only reason why he's calling right now is because he's either trying like hit boat up with his set, or because he thinks you're bluffing and he doesn't want to fold just yet. Then that's fine. So as long as the board doesn't pair on the river, which it doesn't, then we have the absolute nuts in the hand. But here's the difference between having the absolute nuts in the 3-flush board, where we have 2 flushes in our, where we have 2 cards in hand, and then the 4-flush board, is that we should try and go for a small amount of value in this situation, like half pot bet. Given the fact that we have the nuts, we know he can't have the nuts, right? He can't even have anything close to nuts. Like if he has a king of spades out there, he's gonna be afraid of the fact that the ace of spades is out there. So unless our opponent is a like complete maniac, like crazy guy, we really shouldn't be trying to get our opponent stack in the middle in this situation. I mean, yeah, I know I say a lot, right? Where it's like you have the nuts, you try to get your opponent stack in the middle, but in this situation, it's impossible to do that because whenever you overshove here, in a situation trying to get $3 and his final $3, you're gonna get looked up by the straight flush. I mean, and then when you post the hand, you're like, oh my god, it's got coolered, right? And then you're just gonna be like, well, he's only gonna call you here with the straight flush, just because like any thinking player who has the king of spades in this situation is not risking $3 with a second nuts on a 4-flush board. It's just not gonna happen. So we got to be thinking about betting smaller, $1.20. If you bet $1.20 here, he's gonna have a real hard time folding like the king of spades. You know what I mean? He might still fold it, in all honesty, but at the same time, like he's gonna be calling a half pot bet here, infinitely more than he will be calling a over pot size bet in the situation. So think about that. Try and get some extra value in the situation when you have the 4-flush board. Realize that since you have the absolute nuts here, your opponent can't. So, and that's that. Now, the funny thing is, like, you could always bluff this board betting your opponent doesn't have the absolute nuts, and that's actually pretty sick play. But we won't go into that right now. Right, so in this hand, we got Kenny playing, and look into it here. Kenny has pocket aces, and this has to be like a misclick of some kind, or he just didn't see what the stack sizes were, because he's getting like 6-1 here on a turn call. Our opponent didn't even have like a pot size raise left, and so first thing I would say is don't bet as large on this flop. You bet like almost full pot in the situation, and you decide to fold to like a less than min raise back to you because he's only got that much in his stack left. Yeah, that's got to be embarrassing. Don't do that. Just once we hit this flop, all right, it's a pretty big pot already. Our opponent's only got a like 6-1 stack to pot ratio. In the situation on this kind of a board, you're not going to be able to put in 2 bets in without without stacking off, and so you're pretty much inclined to get stacks in the situation, and there's not even like a second thought about it, and it's just a matter of like now taking the best line to get stacks in, and really bet, and then calling the raise is the best line. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but don't fold here. That's kind of gross. Alrighty, we have Snork again. It's got pocket jacks. Get this fishy guy who's min re-raised, this little tight player who limped under the gun. Snorkel re-raises, and it's not that bad of a re-raise, but I don't like the re-raise size. I think what you're doing is re-raising off of our opponent's initial raise size, and so he made it two. He made a min raise, and you made it six. 6x raise isn't really going to do anything, and we want to be making it a larger size to build the pot. Now, I wouldn't like blast it out here and make it anywhere near 50 cents, but my standard raise in a situation, if it were heads up, would be like minimum 32 cents. I would probably make it around 40 cents here in a situation, and it's still, I mean, he's still thinking he's gonna have like pot odds to call you with like a set or something like that, but he's not going to. But we don't really want to be playing like a three-way raised pot at all, especially with a hand like Jacks. It's going to be really hard to play. I would say 40 cents here gets you a nice little pot size on post flop. All right, so this guy here limp calls a raise and a re-raise. This should set off some warning bells on what our opponent's going to be having. He's going to have potentially a really strong hand, or he's going to have pocket pair trying to set mine you. Okay. So you could have like ace king, aces, kings, queens, or he's probably going to have like any, really any pair. Um, so if that's the case, we really have to be careful in how we play post flop. Right? We want to make sure that we get value from all the times that he has a worse pocket pair, and we don't lose a lot of value from the times he has an overpair. This king on the board is pretty gross, just because our opponent likely doesn't have ace queen, and so ace king has gotten there. Aces and kings is still there. He still has queens in his hand range, and then on to boot, he's gotten the pocket nines, pocket fives as well. So there's a lot of cards out there that aren't really going to be calling a bet that we are ahead of. And if that's the case, then we should really be checking in the situation. And this is very similar to the first one of the few hands we went over, right where I had the kings and I checked on the board. This hand plays the exact same way. We have the jacks and a king high board. Go ahead and check. And if our opponent will bluff us with a hand like pocket eights here, pocket sixes, pocket sevens, I mean, we've seen it many times before. And you have to expect it. I would call one bet and then fold the turn if that were to checking it here. We bet out. Our opponent min raises us. I mean, right now, you just be folding. Fold, fold, fold. There's absolutely no reason that you should be calling here at all, even though we do. And then we check fold the turn. Like, what are we expecting to hit on the flop that, that we're going to improve, or I'm sorry, on the turn that's going to improve our hand other than the jack, which we could be already drawing dead to if our opponent has pocket kings. So, yeah, just go ahead and fold with min raise. He's a pretty tight player. If it was a fish that came in, and he min raised the flop, that's a little bit different, but I still wouldn't bet against him anyway. So definitely don't go that route. All right, so we got the next hand here. And in this hand, I had the king queen, but I end up folding it when Snorkel isolates a pretty large size. I could re-raise here as a bluff. I can't really call, but I'm trying to be pretty nitty, as I always am. And I run into, well, actually, Charles is the one who comes in here and re-raises it up. And Charles is the one who has pocket tens. And I don't know what it is with you guys lately, been re-raising pocket tens. But in a full ring game, you definitely don't want to be re-raising that kind of hand. It's just way too marginal of a hand range. And what happens is players are going to be calling us with a tighter hand range than pocket tens, and we're going to end up value timing ourselves quite a bit. And secondly, about this re-raise is the re-raise size. We don't want to be re-raising it up this large. We make it a 20 and a half big blind re-raise size from a 6. Worst case scenario, you add 40 cents. When the open raise size is this large, which is 6x, all you have to do is add 10 big blinds on there. So you would never want to make it more than 16 big blinds. And so that would be 64 cents, right? So 64 cents would be the absolute maximum amount you'd ever want to re-raise in this situation. You could actually make it smaller than that if you're bluffing and still have the same profit potential, just because the pot's going to be pretty massive post-up otherwise when you're bluffing. So the pocket 10 is not a great re-raise in a situation for value. What the hands that I'd be re-raising with for value would be probably just queens, kings, aces, and ace-king in this situation. This is a full ring game, so we want to make sure that we have a significant equity against our opponent's calling range. Now our opponent now is Snork. It's another situation where we're talking about 4-bet sizing. Um, he has Ace King offsuit, and against this massive re-raise size, I would be very cautious with how we play the Ace King. Now, granted, we made the right play in this situation, given that Charles was actually re-raising pocket tens. But if Charles's re-raising range is as it should be, aces, kings, queens, and ace king, four betting here with ace king. This is value range, by the way. He's also going to have bluffs in his range, which would make calling the ace king the better play. If that's his hand range, which it should be, then four betting with a hand like ace king here, this large is certainly not going to be the best play. Now, a lot of you guys are going to be thinking, like, well, what would make a good 4-bet size situation? And honestly, there isn't one other than an all-in. Because what happens is a 50 big blind 4-bet is the same thing as a 100 big blind 4-bet. Because you're not folding to an all-in after putting in half your stack. And God knows, don't say that you are, because if you are, that's actually really bad. So don't 4-bet 50 big blinds, then fold, because you'd be getting 3-1 on your money if somebody goes all-in, and pretty much you can call with pretty much any hand pre-flop, get with 3-1 on your money, and have it be a correct play. So the reason why I don't like the 50 big blind 4-bet is it's the same thing as a 100 big blind 4-bet, and so you might as well make it 100 big blind 4-bet, go all in, because at least then, you know what I mean, you could potentially have more hands in your hand range than like a value range. All right, you could have a hand like you could have a weaker value range, I guess I should say, against somebody who's 3-betting me quite a bit, which, I mean, Charles is a pretty tight player here. Against someone who's 3-betting me quite a bit, adjustment that I will make is start just 4-bet jamming like 2s through 8s. Because against those kind of hand ranges, our opponent isn't likely to be 3-betting like 9s, 10s, and jacks. Well, 9s and 10s, really. And so his 3-betting range is going to be like, his value range is going to be jacks, queens, kings, aces, and then like a lot of these Broadway cards that are offsuit or unsuited. And so when I have 2s through 8s, I'm only an underdog to jacks through aces, but he's going to have a large number of cards here that are like ace, king, ace, queen. And so when you 4-bet jam like a hand like pocket sixes, all right, and your opponent like snaps you off, and he's like, oh, I got ace, jack, and you're like, well, I have pocket sixes, I'm ahead, And it's a good adjustment to make against someone who's just like a crazy 3-better, is that when you do have those pairs, go ahead and jam them in. In this instance, though, like an ace king, when the bet sizes get this large, you can go and make the same play, and it's actually not that bad of a play. If you feel like if your opponent's re-raising you that wide. The 50 big blind 4-bet, though, what's going to happen is he's not only going to 5-bet you 100 big blinds with then an even tighter hand range that he would have called the 4-bet shove with. So I don't like this 4-bet size for that reason. What I would have done here, actually, in this past hand, rather than 3-betting so large, I would have called the 10s, and then if I were Snork facing the 3-bet, I would have just called it or folded. Probably folding it, honestly, with the ace king with that large of a re-raise size, because I don't think our opponent's bluffing us at all. All right, so onto this hand. Snork comes in, he's got a little loose call here in the big blind. Snork in the situation has pocket kings, and this is actually the third time we're going to go over the same scenario here, as it happened 3 times in GCS. Kings on an ace-high board becomes an easy check. Super especially, I mean, I know it's usually always a check, but when we have the king of spades, I'm going to see if we have the king of spades in this hand, which we do, there's absolutely no reason for us to be betting this flop at all. Like, we're representing the ace when we bet. And on any situation where there's an ace on the board, we're representing said ace when we do bet. So we have to realize that. And so if we're representing the ace, our opponent's going to realize, well, either he has the ace or he doesn't. And most of our opponent's calling range is going to include the ace. Now, what's going to happen is our opponent's going to like check raise bluff us quite a bit with the draws in his board. We're not going to be able to see a showdown. And our goal here is to not, one, build a big pot. It's to see a showdown and potentially get 1 street of value from our opponent. Like, that's going to be the goal. And what happens is, so we bet this flop, and our opponent check raises us, and we still decide to call it for whatever reason. I still don't know what makes us think that the pocket kings is any good here facing a check raise on this board. So yeah, this is not a great check raise at all. I'm not a great calling of a check raise, let alone a bet in the flop. And then on the turn is fine. And then on the river, I mean, we're getting such a good price that we pretty much have to call. And we can see that our opponent check raises with ace nine, which is a horrible check raise, by the way, with ace nine. He's not a Grind School member, but if any of you guys out there who are check raising like weak aces like that, I mean, this is a classic example of inexperienced play at the this Microstakes games is players who overvalue top pair, and this is the reason why we don't really ever want to fold like ace king and these kind of stakes, and it's also the reason why like they don't really play the same as they would like at the higher stakes games because you're not going to see the check raisers with the ace nines here and stuff. And it's crazy thing is he got value because you were betting the kings. If you had like the hand range that you should be having here, which would be a flush, which should be flush draws and air and ace X's, you would be winning this hand very large percentage of the time. And what I would have done is I would check behind the flop, call it a turn, and probably call a river bet too sometimes. Sometimes not, depending on what happens. I probably would call if the flush didn't come in and wouldn't call if the flush did come in. So, all right. I believe I remember what this hand is too. So yes, I do. Charles has ace king here, and he's facing a limp min re-raise by a Ubernit 9-2. All right. If this was an unknown player, which he might be compared to the natural, I don't really know what kind of HUD stats we have on him. I have 103 hands on him throughout the entire session, and I've been going through these hands from first to last. So I don't know if this is like his first time at the table or whatnot. But against an unknown player, it's okay to get it in here. 50 big blinds deep with the ace king. Once you realize this guy is such a big nit, I would call them in re-raise and just, I don't know, hope to hit an ace. But otherwise, I would be folding against anybody else. And I mean, definitely don't want to be stacking off here pre-flop with the ace king, facing a limp re-raise. His limp re-raises, sometimes they're jacks or queens, sometimes they're aces and kings, sometimes they're just garbage. Most of the time, though, they're going to be a strong hand. And in all honesty, even if he does have queens here, ace king versus queens, you're not ahead. So think about that too. And our opponent did have the aces, which hindsight 2020 on that one. All right. So check raised, re-raised here in the situation. Let me see if I can remember what this hand was. Okay, he's got ace king. I remember. These so many hands, you're hard to remember what everybody has. Check raise has ace king, and he re-raised pre-flop, and it's an okay re-raise pre-flop. I think we can call here sometimes. Re-raising was okay too. We can talk about this bet though on the flop. And here's the thing, right? So we're betting for value or the bluff. If we're betting for value, like there's only a few hands that are going to be calling us here that we're actually going to be ahead of, and it's going to be really hard for us to play this hand for value post-flop. And so I'm thinking you are betting this hand as a bluff. And in that instance, like what hands really are that are better than yours are folding in situation, right? That are calling the re-raise pre-flop are, I mean, sevens and eights would be the only real hands that would come to mind that would be folding this flop. And otherwise, they're not calling pre-flop, right? Like sevens, eights, first off, have to call pre-flop, and then be willing to fold this flop. And I think given your bet size here, I don't even think sevens and eights are going to be folding this flop all that often. And so way I would play the hand would be I would check behind with the ace-king situation. Preferably if we have the ace diamonds. Bet a lot of turns if we get checked to twice. Otherwise, look to just check it down. I mean, with the ace high board, with ace high, and see that you're going to win quite a bit. A lot of the times, saving money post-flop is just saving when you should be c-betting. And when you have position with ace-king, you don't necessarily, I mean, it's the same thing as having like pocket fives in this situation with the ace king, right? When you bet out with the pocket fives, you're not going to be getting any value from any worse hands. You're trying to get better hands to fold. But the ace king is actually better than pocket fives here because we have more equity. But along the same lines, we have position. We can use that position. Take the free card and let yourself see the fourth overcard. I mean, you might improve on the next street. And your opponent could bluff at you too, like if he has any kind of air, although he probably doesn't after calling the re-raise pre-flop. So we see that we were up against Ace Queen, and we had some kind of crazy read that we were going to get value from Ace Queen, which I don't think that we were trying to do. We actually were trying to get Ace Queen to fold, which isn't the goal that we should be trying to have. But we got unlucky here. All right, so I have Ace Queen. Charles likes to re-raise me quite a bit, blind versus blind, and it's a good strategy to have. Charles, though, has pocket threes, and pocket threes in position is not a great hand to be three betting with. And that's really the only thing I'm going to be saying regarding this play is that since you have position, you're getting 2-to-1 odds on your money. You don't need to be playing. You don't need to be turning a hand like pocket threes into a bluff. And because of the fact that you're ahead so often and you have position, I already have a disadvantage. And you could be bluffing with a lot better hands in the situation. Hands like um, a lot of Broadway cards you can actually call with here. The hands that you wouldn't want to be calling with would be like Ace 9, Ace 8 suited, Ace 7 suited, those kind of hands you want to be three betting. But try and work in your calling range and then be able to bluff post flop and call with hands that you can bluff post flop with. Like there's a lot of implied odds too with the threes that in position you can take advantage of, especially blind versus blind. I'm not folding the ace queen offsuit here against our opponent. If it was against an unknown opponent with these same stats, I probably would be folding the ace queen. But I know that Charles likes to re-raise me quite a bit, so I'm not folding it. On this board, though, there's not really a whole lot I can do. And in fact, there's not a whole lot of boards anyway that I can do with the ace queen. But the fact of the matter is, like, Charles has such a wide range, and I'm getting 2-to-1 2-to-1 on my money here pre-flop to call. I don't really have to win that much. In all honesty, I'm going to be hitting like an ace or queen, 2-to-1 on the flop that I can just go ahead and call with, and I'm hoping to hit and then get some value post up after I do hit my hand, if played correctly. No, it's not a great spot to be in, but it's at least break even for me. So in the situation here, I check, he checks, I check, he bets. So if my opponent was going to be betting or bluffing the flop after re-raising, he's probably going to be doing it or bluffing post-flop after re-raising. He's probably going to be doing so on the flop rather than on the turn. So what happens is somebody re-raises and they hit something marginal on the flop, like a pair of some kind. Let's say he has ace 10 here, jack 10, and he realizes, well, he really can't get much value on the flop. It's because of the calling ranges. And then the turn comes in, he's like, well, no, I'm trying to get value from this hand, so I'm going to bet it out. Well, what happened is he actually had pocket threes here, and he's turning into a bluff. But there's not really a whole lot of hands, though, that beats pocket threes that are folding right now. You know what I mean? Sixes and sevens and nines and all of my pairs and stuff. Like, given that you check the flop, you could also have just like a missed ace king. There's just not a whole lot of boards that I'm willing to fold with to one bet on the turn. So I'm going to be folding here. Now, if you were to double barrel, it'd be a different story. But I mean, at that point, you're reaching on spew with two outs and stuff, and that's not really something that we really going to want to do. Even blind versus blind is just accumulate that, especially when you could just re-raise or just call the raise pre-flop, float me on the flop, and then realize that like this board sucks for whatever hand that I have, and then I'm only going to be value betting two streets with with a really strong hand range on this board, so you can go ahead and fold it otherwise. All right, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so we got this hand here where the natural goes as in limps in pre-flop. He's got king 9 suited, and this is a classic example of how not to play a nice draw post-flop. So you have top pair, nice flush draw, that's great, which means we can play a big pot, but we don't want to stack off, right? We want to win a big pot, but we don't want to get stacked here on this board. So we bet out. It's a perfect size. It's value betted out here. We get raised. So now we got to think about okay, what is our opponent raising us with here after limping in pre-flop? Well, let's go ahead and load this up here. On this board, after limping in pre-flop, our opponent could have aces, kings, tens, fours, which you can't see. He could have potentially queen jack of spades, king 10 suited. He could have king 10 offsuit. We can even give him. I think that's actually a pretty solid range here to have. So against his hand range, king 9 of spades has. Okay. 31% equity, you know what I mean? Not the 50% equity that you guys all think you guys have when you have, oh my God, pair and flush draw, let's hit stacks in. And so against this range, okay, and let's just say this isn't his hand range even. Let's say like he's got an even wider hand range than this for raising. All right, well, what happens though? Like, what do we have? Our options are to one, fold, bad, right? Because we have a really strong draw. Two, we could call, right, which is the play that I'm assuming we should make. And then we have the third option is we should re-raise, all right? And there's not really a whole lot of benefit to re-raising because we have such a, we could be ahead here on this board. And when we re-raise, our opponent who's going to be calling us is going to have this hand range, if not even stronger hand range. So this is the most equity we could have when we plan on getting stacks in. Another reason why we shouldn't be re-raising here and not getting, because what happens is we're going to open ourselves up to have to get stacks in right now. And in a limped pot, and this is a pretty classic rule, we don't want to get stacks in without the absolute nuts. All right? Doesn't matter if you have, and in all honesty, absolute nuts equals a set. All right? Let's just say like minimum of a set. Even if we have like the sixth nut flush, right? A limped pot, you limped in 10-9 suited. You have, the board comes like 5-3 deuce, all spades. You have like the sixth nut flush. Okay? Yes, you should be trying to build a big pot there. But in all honesty, given that you have such a weak hand, you really don't have much to lose if somebody tries to just go ahead and go all in, right? So in this instance, you end up risking like $3.90 to win a 12-cent pot. The risk-reward ratio there isn't that great for just on a draw. All right, so we're not getting the amount of equity that we need. We're only getting, we're getting 1.7 to 1. We need at least 2 to 1 here to make this call. And so this would be a fold, actually, the way we played it. And that's the reason why we don't want to be 4-betting, though, either. Or re-raising him back is because we don't want to have to face a shove. I mean, that's really what's important. We don't want to have to fold to an all-in with such a strong hand. So I would call, and then we're going to go ahead and just check call the turn, and then if our opponent still decides to get all in here on this paired board, we're folding. And that's as simple as that. And it's a standard way to play pretty much every single draw that we have. Or that we would ever have in a limped pot and a single raised pot. It's going to be the same way. We don't want to be stacking off with draws post flop, especially when we have like enough equity that we can call the flop and the turn. We wait until we hit our hand to get stacks in to have be the most plus EV play. All right. So on the next hand here, I have some fun. This is actually the question that Easy2CY raised or he raised the question on the forums before making this video about 4-bet sizing, right? And the situation, like I know check raise, he'd been raising up a lot of buttons. He's folded 3-bets a decent amount. So that makes like my 3-bet here, a pretty standard 3-bet with the suited ace. I've got a blocker, less likely him to have like ace king, aces and whatnot. And so I decided to re-raise him up here. I make it, I added 40 cents here. Since he mashed the pot button, it makes it really hard on me to make it a smaller size. So I made it roughly 3x's raise size, which is just fine. I believe. No, I can't do math. That's I added like 38 cents to it. So that's pretty standard. Now, once he decides to 4-bet me though, I'm obviously not going to be folding here. But what makes the difference between this 4-bet, right, and the very first hand that we went over with? Remember, well, the very first hand, the guy raised 90 cents here, okay? And, it's hard for him to make 90-cent 4-bet, obviously, when I make it 52 cents. The maximum amount of size you should make it in a 4-bet would be $1.20, 30 big blinds. And whenever I see a 4-bet from someone who makes it over 30 big blinds, I immediately know my opponent isn't going to be bluffing. And if he is bluffing, all right, that's my opponent's problem because he's making a minus EV 4-bet bluff by making it over 30 big blinds. And if that's the case, he's more than welcome to have the hand because at that point, I know that I'm winning my hand range versus his hand range in that situation just because of the bet sizing mistake that he had just made. And so this is a bet sizing mistake here. It's completely unbalanced. And during the chat later, and he's like, "Oh man, I wish you would call there." And it's like, well, yeah, of course you wish me to call there. You weren't bluffing. I mean, how often do you see a guy who's making $1 and a 4 big blind bluff pre-flop? ask yourself that question. When you ever make this bet size and be like, well, I'm going to hope my opponent folds, you're obviously going to want to make a smaller bet size. Smallest bet size you possibly can is makes it a bluff. And in that instance, you also want to make the same bet sizing with your value hands, right? You want to make sure, especially when you're talking about pre-flop, 3-betting and 4-bet sizes, you want to make them the same. Post-flop is a bit different, but pre-flop, you certainly want to make them the same, so that way, you at least have the opportunity to get bluffed over the top. And I might have like 5-bet shoved here, if he had make it like $1.10, just because I feel like, I almost expected him to 4-bet me back. And when I feel somebody like 4-betting me back, because he had 4-bet 2 out of 10 times already, and that's kind of high. Not 4-bet me, but he 4-bet somebody else. And when I feel like before I 3-bet that I might get 4-bet here, that's a good situation for me to go ahead and 5-bet shove all in. That's what happened like the first hand when I was playing against BubTubs, where I was like, if he 4-bets me here, he likely doesn't have anything. I'm going to get stacks. I'm going to go ahead and jam it in here, and I'll probably end up winning. But in this situation, when he makes this big 4-bet size, my plan goes to the window of bluffing him. It's like, hey, screw it, buddy. I am out of here. No bluffs for me. So my hand range becomes stringently tighter, and it's going to be really hard for me to get for you to stack me in the situation and give me that 4-bet size. Like I could probably 3-bet fold pocket queens here to this 4-bet size, just because I just know that your value range is just the nuts in the situation. And granted, I don't normally like the 3-bet. I obviously say my 3-bet fold pocket queens, but at the same time, when your opponent makes a crazy bet size that only is the 2 hands, right? He's going to be calling you with a wide range too. You can go ahead and make that kind of a read-based play. So I fold here. All right, and here's another fun hand between myself and BubTubs. This is obviously after the first one. Both of us are going to be pretty aggressive players, and we both know that. And this is just kind of one of those fun kind of hands. I'm surprised this is just nuts. It's crazy. I just wanted to show you guys this hand. So he 3-bets me, and he 3-bets me kind of small. And I don't think this is a value 3-bet in any way, but at the same time, I don't really know how much he's bluffing me either. And so I'm thinking if I 4-bet here, I can probably induce a 5-bet bluff. Just because I know that, we talked in chat after the last hand, I told him I 5-bet bluffed him. And so they think there's a chance he'll come in over the top of me. And I think maybe it's the problem on my end that I don't think after the fact, I don't think he 5-bet bluffs me as much as as I think it would if this were Nitreg versus this 4-bet size. He's gonna play against me more correctly, but at the same time, he's gonna be more capable of 5-bet bluffing me all in. And I don't really think that. And I think I'm trying to think of the right words here. I think I overestimate all the time that people are willing to 5-bet bluff me all in, I guess is the way of saying it. And I also don't think it's going to be as likely here. So I don't really like the reasoning behind my 4-bet, and which is to try and get a worse hand to shove me all in, and I think it's a likelihood. But here's the crazy part. So he calls me, and one thing to know about once he calls me is that he doesn't have ace, king, aces, or kings, because he's going to be shoving those all in pre-flop. I guess you could have pocket aces here, but we're going to know pretty easily. Now, if I had ace, if I were him and I'd call, I'd have pocket aces too. And so I know that kind of hand ranges. He probably isn't 3-betting with a hand like 10s pre-flop, although he might be. But at the same time, I don't think he is. And so his hand range is going to be jacks or better, not even jacks a whole lot. And so he's not going to have very many worse pairs, and he's not going to have ace king a whole lot because he's getting that all in pre-flop. And so he's got some kind of strange hand range of Broadway cards, and ace queen kind of hands. So he's got a very narrow hand range here, which I think I'm ahead of, especially on this board. So this is a crazy board. I don't, on this board, it's so unlikely that opponent has 9s or 10s, just because it's just. He's got one combination of 10s and 3 of 9s available. So the probability of him having a pair now is so tiny, especially when he doesn't get it all in pre-flop. And so when I'm playing heads up, when I 4-bet pre-flop with with a marginal hand, and I get called, especially if it's a maniac, and even ace king, it's a maniac heads up. It's obviously the nuts. But when they call your 4-bet, It plays much differently than you would like in a normal game. It's because a maniac opponent's going to be calling with a really wide range, and so the way to get that opponent to stack off wide post flop and a heads up game when you have ace king, you miss the board, is just to go ahead and bet like really small. And this little bet size here is a great way to induce an all in, especially when you realize like the pot size is massive, and if you make a normal bet size here, you're not going to be able to fold to an all in. So, you know what I mean? You might as well make it a small bet size, and you can either one, fold to the all in, or two, like try to induce a bluff in the situation. And the funny thing is, he called. He could still have pocket aces, but that's really it. I feel like if he has like queens, kings, he's going to be stacking off here. If he has Jack Queen, he's gonna be stacking off here. King Queen, he's probably gonna be calling. So he ends up calling. So I think he's still on a draw. And my hand's still pretty good um, at some point. And then this is like some kind of like crazy sick card too coming up here because now King Queen just got there, but at the same time, if he could still have Ace King, I guess. I go ahead and I check to him, and he bets out, and I check raise all in, and this is like a crazy bluff. I don't even know how this worked. Like this is just one of those just silly hands where it still kind of amazes me that's why I'm going over this in the video because I'm kind of bragging that I got this bluff to work. And apparently, Bub Tubbs also had Ace Queen here. And so where did Bub Tubbs go wrong initially? I would say calling the flop bet, and even then, maybe calling the 4-bet preflop. Calling 4-bets preflop is a dangerous, dangerous game to start yourself into. In position, though, it's not as bad as out of position. I would feel like, though, given that you 3-bet me preflop, I think preflop is where you would be able to get it all in. And otherwise, I think betting the turn here is your big mistake, too. If I were you, I would see the free showdown and go from there. So that way, like you don't have to like bet fold this kind of a gross spot. But this is just a crazy sick hand. That was one of those things that happens in the GCS that I don't normally play this way, and it's just a matter of like sometimes I try new things out against certain player types, and it's a good way of doing it because for one I get like immediate feedback, and two, I have a good decent number of reads on how an opponent would play. So it's just a little bit of fun there. Alright guys, I think that's going to be a good time for us to go ahead and end this video. I didn't get through them all, but it's getting kind of long here. And I think I covered pretty much all the interesting and the most important hands of the session. So guys, this has been a successful GCS. I think I could say that it's been the best one we've had yet for the seasons. In 2011 we had a really crazy this everybody worldwide, you know what I mean, with Full Tilt and Poker Stars, and just having to just change gears middle of the way through the season, and you guys being so great, and and allowing us to do that and willing to do that is just fantastic. And so I really appreciate you guys playing in all these events. And I don't have the exact date down for when GCS rather 2012 is going to start. But look forward to it in your emails. As obviously, as you all know, I am definitely a good emailer, and all that. So stay tuned, guys. Thanks again for playing. A lot of fun this year, and I really enjoyed it. And hopefully, you guys learned quite a bit too. So I'll talk to you guys later, and see you around.